lot of law enforcement agencies are struggling with low morale, recruitment challenges, and a tarnished reputation. If you're ready to transform your agency, to strengthen your team, and build trust in your community, we're here to help. The Elevate Your Call to Service podcast shares a revolutionary approach to leadership development. Join us and discover how to elevate your leadership journey and your agency to new heights of excellence.
We're your hosts, Michael and Kathy McIntosh. Mike is a retired sheriff and current bureau chief in the Denver metro area with nearly 40 years of law enforcement experience.
Kathy is a business and branding expert with a unique perspective on the human side of law enforcement.
Together, we share a powerful blend of practical experience and insightful roadmaps to elevate your call to service. How would it feel if we told you that half your team is holding back, their ideas locked away while the talkers fill the silence? This leaves you as the leader blind to half the picture. It's a team-building obstacle that breeds mistrust and muddies communication. It threatens everything from tactical decisions to morale. In this episode, MBTI expert Mary Thompson reveals why introverts stay silent, how extroverts unwittingly step on them, and the simple shifts leaders can make to turn that divide into a unified, unstoppable force. We're excited to welcome Mary Thompson to the show today. Mary is a leadership coach, self-discovery expert, and founder of Trajectory Forward Corporate Consulting and Flight Deck Life School. She has invested her life in training and developing leaders. With certifications in Myers-Briggs and the strong interest inventory, Mary combines deep expertise in self-assessment and biblical insight to help her clients find clarity and purpose. Her style, real, actionable guidance to help you stop feeling stuck and start living with greater intention, confidence, and joy. With Mary, it's about more than a mindset shift. It's about whole life transformation. Mary, welcome. Thanks for coming today.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm really excited to be here.
Great. You and I had a conversation a bit ago about the difference between introverts and extroverts, and I thought I knew what that was. I thought, and I think this is partially true, that an introvert is a person who recharges and re-energizes when they pull away from others and they rejuvenate in that alone time. And an extrovert is the opposite. An extrovert gets their fuel and their energy when they're in groups and when they're amongst other people. But you had a whole lot to add to that. And I can't wait for you to share that with Mike and me, and we can unpack it and help leaders see that it really does impact teams. And there's a divide when introverts and extroverts try to communicate together.
Yeah, there is. Yeah, it was really interesting to kind of introduce it. Kathy, when we had this conversation, she'd been asking me about some of the things that I like doing with groups. And we had talked about a couple of different assessments, which I've done a number of them in group settings. And Myers-Briggs is really my favorite of the personality assessments and the leadership assessments that I do. But I kind of have a strong reason, and I have a bias because one of the things that I find that's the most understood of the facets of Myers-Briggs is the extroversion introversion. And so most of the facets of Myers-Briggs are a little bit different. The vocabulary is a little bit different than what you would expect to find in the world. But extroversion and introversion are how we orient ourselves to the outside world, but they really have to do with energy, where you get it and where you want to put it. And so I think that a lot of people think extroverts are like great on stage, they're great in front of people, they're people, and they might be. You know, I think that there's social skills that are involved. I will tell you that in my own family, a couple of the introverts are some of the most socially skilled. They're some of the best in front of people. My husband and I, in Myers-Briggs world and in just about every other aspect of our lives, are opposites. And so I'm the extrovert, he's the introvert, but he's far better in front of people. He's great on stage. He's really great at winging it. And but then the thing that surprises people is that when he comes home, he's exhausted from it. And so he has to go. He's got to go off by himself to recharge. One of the other things that sometimes gets a little bit confused is that when I'm doing these presentations and talking it through, introverts will say, well, no, I love being with my mom, or I love being with my best friend, or I can be with my spouse all the time. And introverts do have like one or two kind of key people with whom they can be just as relaxed, just as themselves, as if they were by themselves. And that's something else that, so there's other facets that kind of impact it, but it's really about your energy, where you get it, where you want to put it.
Love it. And I'm an introvert. Mike is an extrovert. So yeah, I feel
We'll
like
never
we
marry
tend to
each
marry
other.
opposite, right?
Hmm.
But do you feel like there's a pretty even split in society as a whole, or do you feel like there's more of one or the other?
No, I think that the last time I went and looked, it's about a half and half. It's about a half and half. And I find that when I do this, most often I do Myers-Briggs. I do Myers-Briggs with some leadership programs. And so in those cases, I'm always doing it in a group, and I'll put them on opposite sides of the room. And so then we kind of go through this fun thing, like extroverts see you introverts as, and introverts, they see you as, and it kind of turns into like a fun, we use barrier language, right? So it's kind of fun. We're like mocking each other just a tiny bit,
Mm,
but it makes it fun for everyone, but also kind of highlights these things that we think, but that we've never voiced,
mm,
right? So then if I've got introverts on one side of the room, I'll say, hey, extroverts, here's how introverts see you. They think that you're bossy. They think that you talk too much. They think um, that you're apt to shoot kind of from the hip. Like, you just, in my house, we kind of say, well, now you're just making stuff up. And I think that it's really easy for introverts to look at extroverts as if they're fake. Like, you can't really be that happy all the time, because extroverts tend to be more expressive, where introverts tend to be more like they kind of keep their emotions to themselves. Thank you very much. And um, in those leadership groups, I usually get to kind of walk through them and do a number of sessions with them. And one or two times there's been a really strong, there was way more introverts in that group than there had been extroverts. And I find presenting to a whole group of introverts is extremely challenging, because they don't give you anything back on their faces.
Mm,
Right. You just say
yeah.
stuff, they just sit there, they're flat-faced, and not on purpose, it's just who they are. They're just thinking about it inside themselves, and you might not ever find out how they really felt about what you had to say. Now,
So,
on the other
so
hand, go ahead, ask me
uh,
whatever you're going to say.
I was just going to ask, when you start talking about, especially when you're developing leaders, or you're in a group of leaders, is it
Hmm.
is it surprising to that group, um, that somebody who maybe they see as a strong leader in their group may be an introvert, and they just realize that for the first time?
That's a great question. Um, okay, so I'm gonna pull a couple little anecdotes out of my hat. So one of the things that I find, there's when you talk about it, I think that absolutely anybody can be a really strong leader. And I think that understanding your style and understanding how you work is really, really important. I find that when extroverts are in charge, introverts get bypassed.
Mm,
And that just seems to be kind of a common theme. And one of the things that I've found to be most insightful is, usually I do the kind of the process with Myers-Briggs is that I'll give the assessment through the company that administers the assessment. We get the feedback. I go through and I do a feedback session where we talk through all the different aspects, and people kind of try to self-assess during that time. And then I give them the report, and we see whether what they thought they were when we were talking about it is the same as what the assessment said. And then we have to kind of figure out, sometimes there's a little bit of kind of just like looking into it and trying to figure out why it's different, if there's any aspects that are different. But beyond that, if I get the opportunity to get in front of them again, we'll start pulling people like apart by the dichotomies, and we'll start doing some exercises. And this is when I started doing these, that's when I realized like what a big divide there is between the extroverts and the introverts. Because what I would do, what we would do is we'd put them on opposite sides of the room, and I'd say, hey, extroverts, I want you to ask introverts how they feel about something, or just ask them the questions that you would want to know about what it's like to live as them. And the introverts would ask the extroverts the same questions. And the extroverts were completely, usually they would ask things like, why don't you speak up? Or how come you won't ever let me know what you really think? Because what happens is with an introvert, they do their processing within themselves. And so if you ask them a question, they're going to want to think about it inside. They're going to want to process it inside. They're going to want to come to that conclusion inside. And then they want to give you what they've come up with once they've had time to do all that. And usually they can't do that like right in the moment, particularly in a work setting or a business setting.
Mm-hmm.
And so what happens is that a lot of times they get bypassed, particularly if everybody else or the management, the leadership is an extrovert. They'll feel as if they don't get anything from them, right? So they go in and say, okay, guys, I need all your ideas. All right, well, the extroverts just start talking because they do their processing outside themselves. They want to talk it through, talk it through, talk it through, talk it through, talk it through. And extroverts typically are not super comfortable with dead air. And so even if they say something and try to get somebody else to say something, if nobody says anything, they'll still they'll just start filling it in.
Right.
And so then the introverts, when we start talking about what do you want to ask them, there's a lot of pain. Like, why didn't you listen to me? Why do you always overlook me? Why do you always go past me? And so the application for leaders is to try to understand where people kind of land within that, and to try to get your introverts to talk to you one-on-one. When you're doing a meeting, if you can give them notes beforehand and let them know the talking points so they have some time to think it through ahead of time, you're going to get better input from them. I think that if I were a leader and I had a group of people and I didn't know what I was dealing with as far as extroverts and introverts, I would say, okay, I'm going to leave this out there. And I know I want to make sure I've heard from everybody about this. And so if you could please come and see me by the end of the day, or get back to me, or send me an email. I want to hear from everybody. I just want to make sure that everybody's had time and I've gotten input from everyone. I think that really helps introverts to be heard, to be seen, but also it helps the leader, because those introverts, they're the ones that are kind of quietly observing. They're not busy trying to talk over the other extroverts.
That's such a great suggestion, Mary. And just sending out an agenda, some notes, some talking points ahead of time. And the leader doesn't have to say, well, I'm going to send this to Susie and Joe and Jake because I know they're introverts. Send it out to everybody, because you're going to misinterpret who's what. So just send out those notes to everyone, and then invite everyone to take their time to respond if they didn't get a chance to share in the meeting. This is a little bit of a silly example, but I thought when the world went to Zoom that it might be easier for introverts, but there's such thing as a Zoom chat. And extroverts just never stop talking. And I have to silence the chat because it's too distracting. It's too rapid. It's I don't have time to process any of it. And it just scrolls in the feed depending on how big your room is, right? So there's all kinds of ways that introverts can feel lost and completely overlooked. And the outside environment just feels really loud from where we are.
Wow.
And not loud volume, but loud.
Just loud.
Loud. Yeah.
Just loud. Just loud. Yeah. I think that I'm also certified to administer. There's a specific assessment that's made for kids. And I have that, I got that certification as well. It's called the MMTIC. But one of the things, those materials for kids are great, but one of the things that they talk about is with your kids, and it applies to adults equally, but extroverts have a tendency, right? If it's in their head, it's usually out their mouth, right? They have to develop a level of self-control in order to keep their face or their mouth from giving themselves away. And so those are the kids that like wind up blurting out, like, something happens, they get mad, and it looks like they're just being really defiant and rebellious, but it's really just they're thinking out loud. Or perhaps you've got a kid that comes home and, they watch some documentary on, like the efficacy of using, like using LSD or mushrooms or something, like how they're doing brain research, and all of a sudden the parents freaking out because they think that their kid's going to go do that immediately, and they're just really talking out loud because they saw this, they saw something and it made them think. And or maybe I'm not going to go to college, like parents are reacting. And if you have an extroverted kid, you need, or an adult, you need to kind of think like, is that your final answer, or are you just thinking this through out loud?
Mm.
Yeah.
Whereas introverted, like the reaction if something comes at them that they don't like, their tendency is to turn around and walk away. Like, I've got to think about this. I need to think about this inside myself. I'm not ready to respond. And so, say you've got an extroverted boss or parent, and they've just given like their very best advice. They're just like lecturing. They're letting whoever it is have it and getting nothing back, right? We've got kind of like a face that's not giving a whole lot of reaction, because usually, they kind of tend to hold their emotions inside. They don't wear their emotions on their face quite so much, and not getting any words back either. So then the extroverted leader is just like, kind of just continuing to let it rip, let it rip. They don't seem to get it. I'm just going to keep going, keep going, keep going. And so then they just kind of continue, like just beating that dead horse. And finally, like they run out of steam, and the introvert might just turn around and walk away. And it just seems like, wow, they just like, they don't even care. And it's not that. The introvert cares very much. They heard all of it, but they need some time to process it. And so I think that another tactic, if we're talking to introverts, is just to say, I'm going to need some time to process that. Could you please let me get back to you on that? Just being able to let them know, like, give me 1 second. Let me hold on just 1 second, even if it's just in conversation, right? It's really hard not to just keep filling the air for the extrovert.
And I'm sure that Kathy told you that I work in law enforcement, and one of the things
Mm-hmm.
that's typically assigned to us is that we have type A personality, right? And
Mm-hmm.
in law enforcement, we have to take in information, make decisions very, very quickly. And you would think that that would be difficult for an introvert to be able to do that. But obviously, there's introverts in law enforcement. But where I do see that they, at times, and it kind of goes back to your point at the beginning, at times struggle a little bit is when it comes time for promotional processes, when you have to go in and you have to kind of sell yourself on what it is that what it is that you bring to the table, or do inboxes, or you're put in a group of room and we're trying to see a group. You're put in a room with a group of people and we're trying to see who rises to the top, who kind of takes charge of that group. Typically, that's not going to be an introvert that does that, right? Because they want to sit back and they want to watch and they want to collect everything that comes in. Where the extrovert is, like you said, kind of talking out loud, but at the same time they're trying to solve that problem, but they're doing that as they're working through it, right? So
Right.
what would you say is me as a leader and as a coach? How do I help coach those that might be introverts that are in processes like that, so that their skills, abilities, and knowledge shine just the same that somebody who, from an extrovert perspective, it may just come, fairly natural to them.
I love this question so much. I just love this question so much. So there's a couple things that you touched on, right, when you were talking that I heard. One was about kind of the decisiveness in the moment, right? And there's, in Myers-Briggs, Myers-Briggs really is all about how you take in information and what you do with that information, how you come to conclusions about the information that you've taken, right? It applies to everybody. And so in law enforcement, of course, that would be huge, right? How
Mm.
observant are you? Some people are more big picture thinkers, some people are more detail oriented. Um, but then there's another facet that has to do with how quickly you like to come to conclusions, right? Some people really want to have everything closed. People want to have things open ended. And the thing that I would say, if I was you and you were saying, how do I coach leaders and how do I coach introverts so that they're on an equal playing field? And really, I mean, to me, the reason that I love personality and I love talking about this is that I want people to learn how to fully embody and really be able to lean into their strengths and use those so that they can be their most effective, right? So that's essentially what you're asking me,
Right.
right?
Yeah.
Yeah. So then the thing that I would say is that I would tell them to be themselves, right? Because one of the things that I have found is that if introverts really understand themselves, they know how to better assert themselves. They don't sit there kind of panicking like, how do I get in? It's more a matter of they go in prepared, right? Like they go in prepared. They're already good at thinking inside themselves. So if they've already thought through what their talking points are or what their main things are, like things or themes, either way, but either way,
Mm.
like they've already kind of thought through, like, this is what I want you to know about me, or this is what I see, then I think that people will tune in, right? Because usually, if they, I think a lot of the introverts that I know in my life, we want to hear what they want to say because it's well thought out, it's well founded, and so it's just a matter of making sure that they've got the space to do that and that that you care, that you care and that you're
Mm.
going to take the time to listen. So I think it's a skill to be developed, but I also think that from an extrovert's point of view, I think that they have to kind of learn the skill of making sure that they don't so over talk and they don't so be so outward, because sometimes if they do too much thinking out loud, they can get to where people don't really listen because one minute they're saying one thing, the next minute they're saying something else. And it's not because they're flaky. I mean, everybody goes through a process in order to come to a conclusion. But if they have to be a little bit careful because, they want their words to have some weight too, right?
Mm. Hmm. Yeah. No,
Did that
great.
answer your
Yeah,
question?
it did. And, recently I was coaching, and I don't know that this person was necessarily an introvert or an extrovert. But the information that you were just giving this person that I was coaching, that's what I was telling. It's really important to be prepared going in there, because we do that inherently in law enforcement. That's why we do training. The more that we can prepare for what it is that we might face, the better we're
Hmm.
going to be able to deal with that situation. And
Right.
it's no different, going through a promotional process like that. The more you can be prepared, um, the better you're going to be able to respond to that, because it gives you the opportunity to think about that and kind of process that before you even step into that room or before you even step into that situation. And I think
Right.
that there's so much about knowing yourself that's so critically important. That's why I love these personality assessments. I've not gone through Myers Briggs. I had an opportunity to go through DISC, and that was, I think, the first personality assessment I went through, and it totally blew my mind.
Hmm.
One, because it was, to me, it was like, how can I walk through these questions and then send them off somewhere and come back? And it's like, how do you know me that well just based off of
Hmm.
those questions that were asked, right? It was like,
Right.
have you been spying on me for the last 15 years? Because, that's really close to who I am, the way that I react, the way that I process information, the way that I respond to people. And then I also know that changes, or at least from a disc perspective, because I went through a disc, like 7 or 8 years later. I had been
Hmm.
placed in different roles in the agency, and I came out a little bit differently, just because
Hmm.
of my knowledge and experience and the training that I had gone through over the course of those 8 years. And
Yeah.
it changes a little bit because you grow, right? I mean, that's
Yeah.
life. You
Disc
you grow
isn't,
in life.
yeah. No, you grow in life. Disc is an interesting one. Disc and Myers-Briggs, there's some parallels you can draw, and I have administered disc. I'm not certified in disc. Myers-Briggs keeps a really tight lid on their
Mm,
assessments, on their
mm,
official stuff. It's only administered through one company. And Myers-Briggs is meant to be something that's kind of your personality doesn't really change over time. It emerges,
mm,
grows, and it develops, and as you age, you become better able to have facility and have like it's about kind of what comes automatically and how you can move forward. I kind of like to think of it as like, what lane do you get in when you're on the freeway? Like, are you like a middle lane driver? I like to be in the left lane. I kind of like to go fast. The But it's kind of like the lane that you automatically get in. These are the things that you just automatically do, right?
mm,
So disc, on the other hand, from what I understand, is it has to do with it's a little bit more situational. And so it makes sense that 8 years later, and you're doing different work, that you would have adapted and you would be utilizing like a different set of tools for your toolbox because that was more appropriate for the work that you were doing.
I remember when I took disc too, they would tell you if you're taking it for a work assessment, answer questions like you were at work. And if you're taking it for a personal assessment, answer the questions as if you were
Mhm.
at home and doing personal things, which
Yeah.
speaks right into what you just said, Mary. But the thing that I loved most about disc was discovering who I was and how I'm wired for sure, but learning just 4 different quadrants of personalities. And it just gave me a better understanding for the people that I interact with on a daily basis. I didn't have to know who was what. I just needed to know all of those personality quadrants
Mhm.
exist. And if I can speak to as many of those as I can at any given time, it's just
Right.
improving my communication. It's improving my leadership. It's improving the connection and the impact that I can have on different lives because I'm aware of different personalities. So if we can raise awareness to what introverts and extroverts are feeling through this podcast and help leaders even just have a light bulb moment like, oh my gosh, I've been squashing the life out of the introverts in my team inadvertently. It's not something that anybody does intentionally or tries to be mean about. But if you suddenly become aware that it's a problem and that you can fix it and you can
mm.
change by just doing
Mhm.
some little things, it's just
Right.
going to make everybody stronger. The whole team gets better because we
Right.
start to understand each other all the more.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. I think that exactly what you just said. I think it's really interesting. I find that, I've used this in a number of settings, and that whole idea of just understanding, right? Like just knowing and understanding when you're around other people. And I told you my husband and I are opposite, and it used to really hurt my feelings when on Friday evenings I thought, like, okay, let's go out to eat. It's the end of the week. Let's go celebrate. And he would say, oh my gosh, it's the end of the week. Let's just stay home. And, and I think that it's funny because I've worked with couples before. And I've told them, like, if you've got an extrovert and an introvert, like, don't be offended when your significant other wants to go out without you, if they have the opportunity. And I'm not saying to do anything crazy, but like if my family was going to go have tacos, I wanted to go have tacos with the rest of my family. And, and at the same time, I needed to not get my feelings hurt that my husband needs to recharge just like I do. And
Mm.
the way he's going to do it best is just to get to be home and in his space and have some quiet around him. And, I think that everybody, if you understand it, it doesn't seem personal, right? No
Right.
longer are you going to take that personally. It's going to be something where I think that the model for leadership, right, is to serve. And so if I can serve you by allowing you to email me instead of stopping by and talking to me in person, because that's going to be a more comfortable form of communication for the introvert, then
Mhm.
great. And if I can serve you by sending the email ahead of time before we talk about it, then that's a way that I can serve you. I can serve you by doing that. And, if I'm an introvert and I'm in front of an extrovert and I say, just talk it out, just keep talking as long as you need to, that's a way that I can serve you, even though that's not my native form of communication.
Mhm. Yeah, that's so important for us that are in those leadership roles. Just that awareness that, because I mean, you kind of explained a Friday night, around our house, especially earlier on. The older I get, the less I want to go out on, on Friday night or at the end of the week. But it's a time. Yeah, let's celebrate. It was a good week, or it was, it's just like
Yeah.
I don't want to cook. We don't want to deal with a lot of. Let's just go and be in this loud restaurant and sit with each other. And and Kathy would be, no, can we just stay home and watch a
Yeah.
movie or read a book or but
Right.
once you understand that, it's like you said, so important so that we don't take it personal. That's just,
Mhm.
and then the way that you turn that to, we're called to serve, right? And that's how I
Right.
can serve my wife. That's how I can serve my team. That's how I can serve those that are in my trust, is to kind of understand what refuels them, what recharges them, what's important to them, because it may not equate to the same thing as what's important to me. So yeah, great stuff.
Yeah.
Really
Yeah.
good.
I think it's really cool. Yeah. And I think that too, if you can kind of like just look at who's on your team and to the best of your ability, try to, kind of like meter, you were asking about in interview situations, or how do you make the playing field even for people that are applying. But I also think that if I were in a leadership position, I would absolutely want to know their entire Myers-Briggs type, because I think
Mm,
that, I mean, I don't, I only know what I know from watching, the myriad shows I do about law enforcement, but I would imagine that there's going to be some, like your more detail oriented personality types. Those are going to be better for certain tasks. There's going to be those that I would think you'd want somebody that's a little bit more open ended and less prone to, going, coming to too quick of a conclusion. I think those would make
mm,
great detectives, like
right.
those kinds of things I think are really important. And there was this one time when I was, we were working, it was a church thing, and I was volunteering, and our church was having this big old Christmas production. And I showed up to help. And the thing that needed help with was like some costume work. Like, and so there was headbands, there was like angel headbands, and they needed stuff glued on them. And so when I got there, they sent me upstairs by myself with the glue gun and the headbands and all the like frou-frou stuff that needed to go on it. And I could hear everybody just like laughing and talking downstairs and having a good old time. And I was just up there all by myself. I felt like I was being punished. And, there's just, it's really interesting because I think sometimes you think that you've got somebody who's not got what it takes, but it could be that they're just sitting in the wrong seat,
Yeah,
or maybe
yeah.
you haven't helped them to find the right on ramp to their own excellence. And so I think in developing people, trying to meet them where they are and play to their strengths is really important.
So just from a leadership perspective, um, explain, if you can quickly, kind of what the commitment is to Myers-Briggs. So if I was to come to you and say, Mary, I would love to know more about my team, and
Mhm.
have this assessment done. What kind of time does that take, and how is that all delivered?
Well, what I would do is we would set you up and everybody would take an assessment, and it would take them probably between 30 and 45 minutes to finish that assessment. And then I would get the results, and then we would get together, and I would probably ask to do it would almost I'm more familiar with education, kind of like an in-service day, but like kind of a training day.
Right.
So if we could spend a half day together, we could go through the feedback, we could do some exercises, we could, we could then go and go through that, and everybody would find out their types. And as I said, it's really fun to do in a group. Everybody learns a lot about each other because all of a sudden everybody's on the opposite side of the room and like, oh my gosh, I knew it. I knew we didn't get each other. Or, no wonder you're over there. And I mean, it's really, really fun. And then ideally, I would love it. I like it when I can come back, a little bit later and do some more exercises and just kind of continue the conversation, because what happens is that it gives you some vocabulary that's positive, right? We all know that we're different. We all know that there's certain things that we, like see or don't get or whatever. But instead of it being something like, you just never like, I told you how introverts see extroverts, but then extroverts sometimes are like, why won't you, you're too private. You never tell anything. You never give anything away. And, all of a sudden we've got some vocabulary. We understand each other. Or, you know, I joke when we get to the information taking in, like there's one of the types that's like, like they're just big dreamers. Like you just are too impractical. And, the ones that are the dreamers are like, but yeah, you're just a fun sucker. You don't, it's just, so
Right.
it's, I think it's really interesting. The person who trained me in Myers-Briggs was actually, he worked with, he worked with people that were in crisis situations because he wanted them to be able to try to help really pull on the aspects and the strengths of their own personality, but also to be able to kind of make some quick judgments about how to meet others where they were when they were trying to diffuse situations. He actually worked with the counselors that were on suicide hotlines. And when I'm thinking about law enforcement, I mean, my goodness, talk about like
Right.
needing to really meet people in crisis and try to help them and make some quick judgments about people. And I think that being open to people and being willing to see them through maybe not a, oh, they're all just this or everybody's just that, but try to really kind of meet them where they are. There's always value in that.
Yeah, that's such a great point. When you were talking about that, that's exactly where I went, was to our deputies that are responding to people that are in crisis and being able to, identify that quickly. The more the
Right.
quicker we can identify that, the better we have at coming up with a solution that really doesn't just work for us, but it works for that person that's in crisis. So yeah,
Exactly.
great information.
Yeah.
Mary, can you tell us where our listeners can find you if they wanted to reach out and connect with you?
Absolutely. Flight Deck Life School is .com is my website, and that's got some information about personality, that kind of thing. On Instagram, I'm at Flight Deck Life School as well.
I'm
Awesome.
sure that some people will be contacting you and wanting some more information about your expertise and the ways that you can help their teams be stronger, knowing one another. One of the things we like to do at the end of each episode is give a recap and kind of give a challenge to our listeners. These are some things that you could do this week to help bridge the divide between introverts and extroverts on your team. What would you say would be the top low-hanging fruit that a leader could grab hold of and help use that to unify a team?
Okay. That's a great question. So, off the top of my head, I would say as a leader, I would try to identify myself, like where am I getting my energy? Where am I putting my energy? So I would try to think through like the work aspects of my day. Like it's just, like I love getting, so say that I'm the leader on the floor. Do I get a lot of energy by walking around and talking to everybody, or does that something that kind of like saps my energy? Do I love getting to have the one-on-ones with people, or do I like getting to be out there and mixing it up with everybody? Do I like meetings or do I hate meetings? I would try to really figure out where my strengths lie, because I think that wherever we are going, where our energy kind of gets added to, we're going to be at our best. But then I would also try to like then take that and think, okay, my key team members, what's their answer to that, or what am I seeing from them? And maybe like try to have a sit down and say, okay, how do you feel like we're doing, and what could I do, that what am I doing that's zapping your energy, and what can I do to help you to maximize your energy as you're doing your work? I think that's where I would go.
That's great.
Yeah. Yeah.
Really good. A couple of things that I jotted down from our conversation is providing notes before a meeting to let everybody start to process before the meeting even takes place. And then if you're an introvert, be bold enough to ask for extra time to process if that's what you need. And if you're an extrovert, learn that you do not have to fill every second of silence so that you can allow room for others to speak. It's just kind, right? And it's
just kind.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Excellent.
Yeah.
Anything else that you'd like to add, or last parting words of great wisdom?
No words of great wisdom, but I really, I've heard a little bit, Mike, about what you're working on, and I'm so excited about it. I'm just really excited about it. I think it's just so needed and so necessary, and I really appreciate your service. I'm just so in awe of the work that you guys do, and have enjoyed getting to work with Kathy over the last year or two, and get to know her. But anyway, I just wanted to say thanks for having me, and thanks for the great work you guys are doing.
Yeah.
Mary, it's been an absolute delight, and I can see you popping in from time to time and just
anytime
sharing your expertise with us. So
yeah, I'd be more
thank you for being here.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you.
Ready to build a stronger team, improve your reputation, strengthen officer safety, and recruit top talent? Visit us at leleaders.com and schedule a call with us today. We'd love to discuss how our coaching programs, workshops, and keynote addresses can help you build proactive leaders in a reactive profession.
In the meantime, if you like what you've heard today, we'd love your 5-star review on Apple Podcasts.